Hello friends, welcome to the 7th lecture of our course Business to Business Marketing. So, today we will be starting with a new unit which is the organizational buying behavior. Now, till date you must have seen situations where you have made a purchase and you have seen retail consumers buying products from the market. So, there we have seen that the complexity of purchase is not very high, right, as the products are more or less standardized products and they are low capital intensive products. So, it is not a very difficult thing to make a purchase in the consumer product categories, right. But when we talk about organizational buying, the situation changes. So, here you talk about large bulk purchases, you talk about heavy discounts, right, heavy negotiation happening in there, and the products may be quite capital intensive and has a very long life, right. So, in such situations how do organizations buy? And one more thing we have seen is that they have very few customers, right. So, in the B2B marketing, the number of customers are very concentrated and they are very focused in nature. So, how do organizations go for a buying approach, or what buying approach do they follow? Today this is the point of discussion for us. So, why to understand first of all buying behavior in the B2B market. So, if you see, for developing effective marketing strategy, business marketers need to understand not only the nature of the business buying, but also the business or organizational buying behavior, right. So, because if you do not understand what is the nature of buying and how the people are buying and all, then what happens is you cannot create a proper marketing strategy, because you know that advertisement and promotion, like normally what works in the consumer market, that does not work well in the business market. So, you need a different kind of approach. So, how do you build that new strategy, that marketing strategy for the for the business firms? So, in order to do that, business houses need to be very clear about the nature of the business buying and the behavior involved in it, right. So, if you can see today in this that small picture, you can see that most of the buying has been influenced today by the e-commerce, right. So, you are making purchases through the internet. So, this has really revolutionized the way purchasing has been done. So, internet has brought in several changes. For example, when you have ERP systems, you have so what it has done is it has connected the entire different functional areas of the departments, and it has helped us to understand how the vendors have to be managed, right, or how do we manage the entire supply process, right. So, all this has been revolutionized, as I said, because of internet and use of mobile devices and everything, right. If you see what has happened on the other side of the business market, right, it is just a business marketer seeks customers. As business marketers seeks customers, so the business buyers also seek the suppliers or vendors, right. So, what happens here is the purchasing function becomes a very important function. In fact, you will not believe that most of the savings or increasing the profitability of a firm can happen by managing the purchasing function in a better way, right. So, the purchasing function becomes very important because it helps in a regularized flow of the goods and services into the system, and it also has a lot of potential to control the amount of profit or the revenue for a company. That is why buying or purchasing becomes a very important parameter or very important point for any business marketer, right. So, what forces are in fact impacting? Let us first talk about it. So, when a business marketer talks about when we talk about organizational buying behavior, what factors influence the buyer behavior? Now, when we talk about the environmental influences, there can be many. For example, the physical points, technological considerations, economic, political, ethical and cultural. So, these are some of the important points that can influence the buying behavior. You see, when you are talking about buying behavior in the business to business section, you are talking about large industrial houses maybe, or large organizations, or even small organizations, but still it is much bigger in size than an individual customer or a retail customer. And these houses or these firms, small or big, they are influenced by several factors, as it has been mentioned in this diagram. And because there are a lot of people involved, so that also creates a separate kind of situation or a stressful situation in the business to business buying behavior or the organizational buying behavior. Okay. So, now let us look at each one of them. For example, the physical influence. Now, what do we mean by the physical influence? For example, the geographical location, the climate, etc. of the purchasing firm in relative to its suppliers may be decisive, since many firms prefer to source supplies locally. Somebody, for example, this gentleman is thinking, why should I increase my cost by importing from Japan, for example, right? A businessman in XYZ, for example, in let us say Delhi, is thinking, why should I increase my cost by importing from Japan? Now, if you look at the other side, sometimes it may be heavily beneficial for firms to import from other countries. For example, if you look at in today's world, most of the items which are assembled, for example, a computer or even a phone, mobile device or anything, they are largely assembled by products which are taken from the different countries or different parts of the globe, right. So, sometimes you would prefer a local supplier, but sometimes even in other times you might prefer from a supplier who is a specialized supplier from some other country or other place, right. So, depending on the profitability or the impact it can make on the profit of a firm, so the decision is taken. So, geographical location can play a very vital role, the climatic condition, right, even the ecological condition of the place. So, this can have some influences on the decision making process. Similarly, technology, as you can see with time, technology has been growing up very fast, right. So, the technological development and the benefits that we derive from it has been immense, and it has made competition much severe, right. So, if you see now how technological influences have changing the entire way businesses are done. So, the buyer and the supplier, for example, they may be both, right, using advanced technology to streamline their buying processes. Now, for example, concepts like just in time, for example, or concepts like vendor managed inventory. Now, these are possible just because there has been a significant technological influence and technological growth, right. Now, if you look at the way technology has influenced, right, I think it can be very easily considered to be the most significant driver of business. Now, when I am saying this, if you can understand that today most of the products are having a very low shelf life. Now, what I am saying here is okay, most of the products, especially the high tech products, have a low shelf life, right. So, the entire journey across the PLC, they for example, high tech products especially, they take a lot of time to grow, but they stay for a short time in the maturity stage and then they steeply fall down. Why? Because there is a substitute effect, new technology has allowed to create better products, right, by competitors. So, all this have created a lot of technological challenges, right. And more than this, one more thing that has to be understood is that technological influences are very important in the sense that since nowadays we are collecting materials from all across the globe, so there has to be a compatibility among the material, right. Otherwise, if you make a let us say computer and some part you are getting it from China, some part you are getting it from let us say Israel, some part you are getting from Canada. Now, the kind of technology these people are using, if they are not compatible in nature, then when you assemble make a final product, the final computer, maybe it will not work well due to the incompatibility of these ingredients or the products inside the computer, right. So, for example, you look at this gentleman and he says we do not have technological capability to deal with this US company. So, possible. So, that means if for example, you are buying something and you have made a contact or a deal with a company which is very advanced in technologically, and you are technologically not that advanced. So, in that case either you have to improve your technological processes or you cannot continue with the business, right. The third important point that affects is the economic influence, right. So, the macroeconomic environment is concerned with the level of demand in the economy, right. So, for example, recently we had a COVID effect, right. So, when COVID effect was very significant and demand for products substantially came down, even the growth for most of the economies contracted, right. So, almost all countries saw a negative a fall in their growth, right. All countries, almost all countries. Or it can happen that recently the US Fed has increased the interest rates. Now, that has also created some kind of turmoil in the markets, right. So, the taxation that is prevailing in a country or the rate in the currencies. So, these things also can have a major impact on the economy or the the demand of the product, right. So, these all points would come under the economic influence. Now, these influences have an impact, let us say certain products become costly or cheap due to the let us say taxation problems, right. So, now this will also have an effect on how much the demand will get affected later on, right. So, I think economy is getting into recession, we should not go for expansion now. Now, this is what the gentleman thinks, a senior executive in the firm, in a B2B firm, because as you know that B2B firms always follow a derived demand, right. So, if the demand is derived, that means we will only be able to produce a B2B product by looking at the demand of a end product. So, which is connected to the end product, which could be anything, right, a soap, detergent or even a cosmetic, anything, right, or even a medicine, anything for that, right. So, because the economy is getting into recession, people will not have much of purchasing power. So, the business house also understands that our products also will not get sold much. So, let us stop the expansion process for the moment. Then you have political and legal issues, right. So, governments frequently pass laws affecting the way businesses operate, and this is more true in international trade. For example, trade sanctions, barriers and non-tariff barriers. So, all these kind of conditions when applied, right. So, they make a lot of impact, right, on the businesses. For example, the the Russia-Ukraine war going on at the moment, and Russia has been sanctioned. Now, the point is, when this has happened, what happens to the businesses in Russia, right. I think you must be knowing that some of the firms, US firms in Russia, now they are thinking of leaving and coming out of Russia, so closing their business and coming out of Russia. Even the Russian firms, now they are also affected due to this Ukraine war, and not only Russia and Ukraine or USA, but many other countries also getting affected. And there are also political issues. For example, like we had the GST taxation system, the goods and services tax that recently was started in India. So, now this has created a new kind of impact on the businesses and directly on the businesses, for example. Now, all businesses will come under this GST. So, earlier many firms were getting easily, they were escaping without paying any taxes, but now they have to do it. So, the GST can be one such issue that can have an influence, right, on how the business firm would deal with the product and their sales. You see what this gentleman is doing, right, the blue coat gentleman, right. So, in general, buyers are expected to act at all times for the benefit of the organization. So, if I am working in an organization, it is expected that I will be working for the welfare of the organization, right, and not for personal gains, right. So, there are organizations like very popular organizations which like Tata's, which are very considered to be very ethical in India, right. And these organizations, the Tata subsidiaries of Tata, they do not get involved into any kind of unethical practices and all. So, that is why Tata has a very clean and good brand image. Okay. When people are not working for personal gains and they are working for the organization, this means that in most culture the buyers are expected, for example, to be honest, right, and not to accept bribes as this gentleman is doing out here. Now, what does he say? Now, the contract is all yours. Now, for example, if you are following the news in India, you must be hearing lot of scams or lot of such kind of the ED raids and all, the CBI raids where people have gone for personal benefits, right, and they have the whole organization is generally not involved. Maybe a few people in an organization are responsible for the or giving a tender to a maybe a contractor or a supplier, and that might be not based on always aspect of quality, but rather it could be on basis of certain personal benefits and all, which can influence the buying process, right. Now, this is something which is highly unhealthy and which is wrong, right. The next is cultural influences. Now, culture establishes that the values, attitudes and the customer behavior, language, religion, art of a given group of people, right. So, when we talk about culture, we talk about these things. So, when we are dealing with international clients and all, there are so many cultures involved, right, and this can involve the way we are doing business. So, you will see in the forthcoming slides that when you talk about business to business relationships, right, it is very important to understand that you may be working with different countries, and the decision maker of a firm, the way he gets into a new place and the way the culture affects him, it might affect his decision, right. Now, in the UK, it might be, for example, it is customary to offer a visitor a cup of tea or coffee, right? But whereas in China, it might be customary to offer food. So, these kind of cultural differences, for example, let us assume now there is a Chinese guy who goes to UK and he is offered only a cup of coffee, he feels offended maybe, and that might influence his decision now. So, these kind of influences can play a vital role, right. Now, coming to this pictorial representation again, what is the lady thinking? I am an emotional shopper, right. 70% of emotionally engaged consumers spend up to twice as much on brands they are loyal to. Now, that is a very interesting finding. 70% of emotionally engaged. So, if you are emotionally engaged with, let us say, Hindustan Unilever Limited, or let us say you are with Dabur, for example, let us say Indian brand. So, you will be spending twice as much on Dabur because you are loyal to that brand. Now, the question is, this is for a consumer marketing, right. Will this same logic apply to an industrial market or a B2B market? We do not know, but logic says ki it should not be, because we have seen the differences between consumer and business to business market. So, we have understood that there is a significant difference, right. So, do brands work even in the industrial market or the B2B market? Do brands even work? And if works also, will people really be getting impacted because of a brand, or as we said that they are rational decision makers, so brands might not influence them, which is true now, we will have to see. So, let us go first into some of the models of consumer and industrial marketing, B2B marketing, and let us see. So, here the gentleman is asking a question, is B2B market really fully rational, is a question. So, because we had said that it is a rational market, so there is a question coming up, is it really fully rational? Now, generally when we talk about a B2B market or a organizational buying behavior process, so if you can see, there are 3 departments which are generally involved in the business to business purchase, right. Who are they? Now, the purchasing agents. So, you can say the people involved in the purchasing process in organization, the quality control people, generally who are basically the engineers, and then you have a manufacturing department who are basically people from the shop floor, right. So, they are the people who are involved in the B2B buying process or the organizational buying process, right. So, but this question is again coming back, is B2B market fully rational? Brands really do not have an impact? So, this is a question that we will be answering it later on with time, and maybe you will be able to answer yourself when I explain my slides better. So, as it says, organizational buying is often supposed to be more rational, right, and less emotional than consumer purchase behavior. But to assume that they are entirely rational and there is no impact of emotions cannot be considered correct, because after all, who are they? The people are human beings, right. So, the decision is taken by human beings and they cannot leave their emotions completely out, right. So, it is unrealistic in nature, because some influence of brands or some emotion, some loyalty factor, trust factor, all these might influence the decision making process. So, we cannot say all the time it can be considered rational, but yes, to a large extent, no doubt about it, it is rational. And very interestingly, one more thing that comes to my mind is that many industrial buying decisions are not solely in the hands of the purchasing agents, right. So, there are other people also who are involved. So, since there are so many people involved in the organizational buying behavior, or organizational buying process. So, the one might not be emotional, but the other person might be emotional. So, and there might be a clash between that thought process. For example, let us say, so there is a finance head who is involved in the buying process, and there is also a person from the engineering department, quality control department. Now, the finance guy wants the product to be brought at a any new material or product at a very less cost, right. So, he wants to optimize, or he wants to perform better in bringing down the cost of the product. But the quality control department or the head of the quality control department, he might not be interested in the cost, but rather he would be interested in the quality of the product. So, here there might be a clash between the two people, and on the third front there might be a marketing guy who might be saying, though, well, I do not need neither of what you are saying is correct, I want a very new innovative product for the market. Now, these issues will be always affecting the organizational buying process. So, let us see the phases of the organizational buying process now. So, there are three phases or three things that are involved. The first one, the psychological world of the individuals. So, the people who are involved in the decision making process of a product, what kind of a psychology do they hold? How do they think? What is their how is they make decisions, right? Second is, it relates to the conditions which precipitate joint decision making among these individuals. Now, the second phase is where you think about whether we should make a individual decision or we should take a joint decision, right, or what should we do. So, how we should take a decision, because we have talked about organizations, they generally talk about joint decision making, because they are large volumed business, heavy number of items being very high, and the influence on the profitability and revenue is very high. So, sometimes we may have to take a joint decision, sometimes we may have to take a individual decision. The third phase is when you take a decision, or during the process of the decision, there might be a conflict that might arise, right. Now, if there is a conflict, how do you handle this conflict, right? So, three important things which are very important we said is the psychological world of the individuals, and whether the decision has to be taken jointly or individually, and that depends on several factors which we will see in the forthcoming models, right. And the third phase is, there is no doubt that if there is an organization and there is a buying or there is some processes happening, then there will be some conflict. How do you manage this conflict? And because see, even if you in your home, if you are going to buy something, there might be a clash between you and your family members, because you want a different color, maybe your family members want a different color, or you want a a very high quality product, your family members want to cut down the cost. So, even with two people it can happen. So, just imagine an organization where the amount of purchase is so heavy and there are so many people involved, right, in the decision making process. So, there is no doubt conflicts will arise, and arising conflicts is a healthy sign. In fact, it is not bad, it is healthy for the organizations. But the question is, if it is rational, if everybody is working for the objective of the organization, then the conflict can be considered rational and healthy. But if the conflict is arising due to a personality problem, because of the personality of the individuals and they are compromising with the objective of the organization, then in that case it cannot be considered healthy, right. I will wind up here right now. In the next lecture, we will be continuing with what are the different business models, organizational buying behavior models that are very popular, and I will also try to explain to you how the decision making happens and what factors affect the organizational buying behavior process, right. So, with this I would like to wind up the lecture today. So, have a great time. Thank you very much.